Welcome to the Sage Verse, with real works and true words. Patterns of recognition leave your brain converged. Time is irrelevant when the thoughts of impediment corrupt your soul with mind-numbing nemesis. The sage's way is where the truth hits the page. Turn your soul into a library in the name of knowledge and discovery. We seek out reality to be gone of human apathy. Welcome to the Sage Verse, where we explore the pressing questions of our age. My name's Jason, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and fellow founder of the channel, Hermes. How are we doing today, brother?
Very well today. Thank you, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So it's your day today. What concept do you have in mind? What question do you want to discuss?
So I want to discuss what Plato used to call the scholar athlete. The idea of that scholar athlete. And there's a very good quote that kind of paints the idea of what that means. It's by an ancient Greek historian called Thucydides. The quote is, "The society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools." So I want to discuss that idea of the necessity of building a strong mind and a strong body. And I guess the vice that can be caused by going to the extremes of either one. If you have a very strong mind but a weak body versus having a very strong body but a weak mind. So do you want to kind of let me know your immediate thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different aspects about that quote which you can go down. And I suppose what symbolizes the scholar athlete, or the quote that Thucydides gave there, I was just thinking about, the true martial artist, perhaps the old kind, the ones that were not just concerned with developing combat skills, but were also there to really build character, build respect, honor, loyalty, all these virtues that are intangible to accompany, in effect, the physicality that they possess. So, Bruce Lee spring into mind. Bruce Lee, you could argue, is a scholar athlete. He was able to really furnish and fashion his mental faculties and his frame.
Yeah, Bruce Lee actually had a philosophy degree, didn't
he? Did he? I'm not too sure.
So he studied philosophy. I remember it was in his one of his movie, and it was the kind of life story thing. I think it's just called Dragon. He studied a philosophy degree. I think it was his girlfriend at the time, who later became his wife, asked him, like, why philosophy? And he said, so he can have deep thoughts about being unemployed. So that's quite a funny one there.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no philosophy factories opening up, so that's what he'd be destined to do.
But yeah, he studied philosophy. He adapted kung fu. He created his own martial art, Jeet Kune Do. He pretty much invented modern day MMA. Dana White attributes that to him, that combination of other martial arts being united into one.
You could say, right, that's a credit to his thinking. He was able to
100%.
He was able to expand his perspective to see the multitude of fighting styles and how they could be combined to create what we now know as MMA, which is arguably the most physical sport.
Yeah, he was one of the most revolutionary martial artists, I think, of all time. He was the one to unite the Eastern and the Western, or introducing the Eastern to the West. He got in trouble with a lot of kung fu kind of leaders at the time, because it was something that was kept strictly to the Chinese. But he was someone that really much introduced it to the Western world and got in trouble for it. But later he was praised, and he did a lot of good. And I think a lot of it can definitely be attributed to his philosophy as well. He's got a really good book, The Way of Jeet Kune Do. He just had a revolutionary way of thinking, but he also had that strong body. He is pretty much the perfect example of an athlete scholar.
Yeah. And of course, just to go back to the Greeks so we don't leave them out, I mean, they were kind of obsessed with, obviously, we're learning through the eyes of philosophers, statesmen, and scholars at the end of the day. We don't know, perhaps, the ins and outs of the average Greek man or woman,
Mm-hmm.
but at least the ideas that have come from that period seem to gravitate towards the cultivation of reason, so our mental faculties, but also a strong body. Now, there's a Socrates quote that's come into mind. It's gosh, it just skipped there. Let me think for a second. It is a shame for a man to grow old than to see the body, or than to see the beauty of which his body is capable of.
Yeah, I like that one.
Which I think, Socrates is perhaps, he's talking there from different sides. Like he's saying, he's appreciating perhaps the physical body, the physicality that we can achieve, but also perhaps he's referencing the importance of having that physicality. But I think in that quote, it's more the case. Look, this is what you're capable of. This is what is possible within the confinements of nature. Why don't you strive for excellence in everything you do?
Yeah.
And one avenue of that is your physical body. And I suppose to apply that to the modern day, we've kind of moved away from, well, we haven't. There are gyms, there are people that go to the gym and are
it's
interested,
separated. The combination of the two isn't discussed enough, I believe. The importance of the combination of the two. People tend to kind of either stray to one or the other, I find. But I really believe that combination of the two is important. The ancient Greeks really did believe the combination of both was important. We discussed Plato a lot here, like even Plato's name, Plato or Bladon, it means like broad-shouldered. It was like a nickname he was given as a wrestler. He was a very proficient wrestler and an amazing philosopher, as we know. So they believed in that combination. They believed if you had a strong mind but a weak body, you were a great thinker but a coward. If you had a strong body but a weak mind, then you were a warrior but a fool. And the combination of both is essentially
the ideal citizen.
The ideal citizen, the ideal person, someone that has self-cultivated, self-mastered. And I want to go back to that Bruce Lee quote I mentioned, the kind of funny one. So he said when he was asked why he did philosophy in the modern day, because he's, I guess, closer to our time, he said, so he can have deep thoughts about being unemployed. So I want to discuss this because we do live in a capitalistic society and people only see what is useful should be, I guess, pursued. And when you are in a capitalist society, what's useful is how do you make money and how do you be a good citizen within that framework. So this need of philosophy has been, I believe, abandoned to an extent and not deemed as useful. Even martial arts. People are very interested in martial arts, but in modern society, we're also just expected to be protected by the police. Any kind of issues, call the police, or especially in England, there's very little self-defense we're allowed to kind of practice. So to an extent, I guess we can practice it. But again, that's deemed, as we have that police force there that you can call at the end of a 999, there is kind of an abandonment, I think, of the importance of self-defense in martial arts and being your own protector and your family's protector.
I suppose, philosophy is almost like food for the soul, or food for the mind. And to accompany that thought for a second, by philosophizing on, the idea of self-defense or the need for a police force to protect you. I mean, depending on how you think about it, we live in this world where nobody knows where threat may come from. Nobody knows where threat might come from. So taking that on board, it seems that from the perspective of the individual, it's kind of essential to at least develop some sense of independence, and not in the sense that we live in this comfortable cloud where there is not any danger, no reality. The existence of danger or existence of threat never disappears, right? We can't run away from nature no matter how far we run. So we might as well try and cultivate the best version of ourselves. And philosophy is a tool in identifying what that version might be. So if we are to look in the mirror and say, how can I improve myself? Well, we all have dreams and ambitions of what we can achieve, but we should be realistic, but we should also have a certain degree of optimism in that.
Yeah.
But not to the point of to being delusional, but things that are realistic, and we can always do better. And perhaps, we should focus more on what is possible, what can I achieve if I really put my mind to it.
Yeah.
Because now we live in an age where empathy is almost enabling certain things that perhaps reason would domineer in a negative way. Like if you were back in the day, your father might say to you, you piece of shit, get off your ass and do some work.
Yeah.
I don't, as everyone's heard, perhaps, those who are, lucky enough to have a father around. I know not everyone has that privilege, but those words you could say are, the negative side of what is the reasonable thing to do or what is the right thing to do. And an empathetic approach may be, maybe this person has experienced something, maybe they're sad, maybe they're going through hardship, maybe they've just broken up with a loved one, maybe they're just having a difficult time right now. So maybe what is the solution is the marriage between reason and empathy. Empathy may well be the tool in order to administer the truth. This is what I wholeheartedly agree, and this is what I think we can instill in people that are going through maybe negative experiences, difficult times, so that they can also build a sense of optimism. They can now see perhaps the darkness, or they have someone alongside them that's ready to fight the demons that they may be facing. Rather than just being shot down, you can marry the two. But what we should not do is ignore the existence of what is right. By ignoring the existence of what is right and focusing solely on empathy, we are enabling weak states.
100% agree. And I think in that fight, everyone battles their own demons, or do have physical confrontations and battles in life as well. That's where I believe truly that the mind and the body are your tools, and in that fight, that's going to serve you within that fight. And I believe you need to sharpen your mind as well as your body. I really believe it's important to kind of pursue both. So I guess with the scholar side, I think philosophy is definitely a big one. I remember when I was in China.
It could be anything, though, right? It could
be
any kind of
knowledge. It tends to
be
because philosophy teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to use your mind, and that can be coupled or grouped with any kind of direction or scholar you want to pursue, whether it's mathematics or kind of any direction you want to go in. I do think philosophy is the kind of overlying sharpening of the mind in which you can apply it to life in general. And same with your body, just strengthening your body, but is important. And if you want to choose a specific martial art where you're proficient in fighting in itself, then again, that's like picking a subject with the mind. So this sharpening of the body as well as the mind, I think it's really important. As I was going to mention, in China, we would train 7 hours a day, and every evening we would meditate, and also once a week we would have a tea ceremony with the master, and we would discuss Chinese philosophy as well as just philosophy in general. And they were kind of building that strengthening of the mind, teaching us how to think, how to debate. So it was very much, they coupled the two. They made you believe it's important to have both a strong mind and strong body. That's what made it a complete martial art. Did you?
No, 100%.
We went to different schools in China. Did you have tea ceremonies at your school?
No, unfortunately, I picked. Well, where do I begin? Because I picked the most traditional school that you could find, because I wanted the real experience, and I was seeing kids, crying, doing backflips on concrete, getting beaten with a stick, and I saw
a few kids get beaten.
I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, and I went to try and help the girl, and I never forget this. She got up, and she was in a headstand. She fell down and she started crying. And I was like, you don't have to do this. And then she wipes the tears away and goes, no, I must do this. And I was like, fair enough.
Made a different stuff.
And she was like 6 years old. And
that's mad.
I remember Chongqing, my coach.
I was a pussy when I was six years old.
do you know what I mean? There were she kicked off a little bit, but I really liked the experience. I really liked the hard lined
Mm-hmm.
attitude that they had, and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't take shit. There was no nonsense.
No, it's true. I got the bamboo a couple times.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
remember. I remember because obviously I got injured over there, and they still wanted me to train while I was injured, and unfortunately it was one of those injuries. A bit of nerve damage is not something you really want to, um, you know,
Train
push
through.
through. It's a bit stupid. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so, I wanted to take my liberties a bit. I'd paid to be there, and I was like, I started rebelling and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are, there is a side to both things. I what I didn't appreciate so much was, being an adult,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want people to control you
Mm.
by definition. So,
Well, I found that when I first went out there, we even had a discussion in the tea ceremony with that kind of thing. And one time my coach told me the students had cleaned the whole school, and the master came and was inspecting kind of everything, and then he just like dropped a plant pot and was like, "You guys all missed a spot," and they still kind of cleaned it and were respectful. Well, what they do is they push your ego. They really test. It's part of the practice to an extent. And it's mad because you go out there, you're paying, you're paying your money to essentially be, you feel like a servant a little bit.
yeah,
It's like
to
even
be
in
a
the Karate
subject.
Kid,
You're a
like
bit
where
of a subject.
he's making Mr. Miyagi's making him clean his car and things like that. It made you feel like that.
We had to
Every
farm.
Wednesday we would sweep the whole school, and yeah, it was a bit. It tested your. But in the West, we have a massive ego, and we're very feisty, and we don't want to be told what to do. But there, they really push that you need to
This
have
this
respect,
is the
and
thing.
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but this is the thing. I went to seek out that, right,
Mhm.
because I knew that getting my hands dirty,
Mhm.
doing farming, things that we're not really exposed to,
Mhm.
doing farming, training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, really pushing yourself physically and mentally.
Mhm.
That's what you want to do, and of course there are going to be challenges along the way.
Yeah.
But really, I before I came across that quote, or before I knew what the scholar athlete was, the whole reason why I went to China in the first place was to push myself physically and mentally.
Mhm.
So it was kind of I was searching for that. Do you
Yeah,
know
so
what I
so
mean?
so was I. I
So
was very before I went out there. Like I literally had done no real exercise before in my past. I had no kind of football training, or I didn't practice any martial arts proficiently. I couldn't even touch my toes. So I went out there with a pretty much, empty
wow,
vessel of a body, as well
yeah.
as the discipline side. I was, like I said in the past, I was a very rebellious person. I was very feisty. I was very fight the power without any kind of standing or like strong thing to back that up. It was just I was quite angry to an extent, and they really tested me out there and like pushed me. I've played to the best physical level I've been at, as well as the best mental level I've been at as well, of being kind of respectful and thinking before I speak, things like that.
Yeah, I think obviously I suppose I had a bit of a different background. I did dabble with different martial arts, gym, football, and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
sport had always been a part of my life. In fact, sport was predominantly the part of my life up until the age of 16 or 17. And that's when I really started studying.
Hmm.
Because prior to the age of 16, I never really picked up a book. That's why my GCSEs were a shit stain compared to what I got later on,
Hmm.
which is, I don't know, maybe it's a testament to some of the research that's being done now, in that boys mature far later than girls,
Hmm.
which some people are saying that boys should go to school a year later because of that. So for me, the idea of the scholar athlete was was kind of an ideal. It was an ideal,
Hmm.
and I wanted to strive for that.
Hmm. Yeah, that as I was saying about application, so like a lot of people not believing philosophy has use in the modern day, because everything you should kind of pursue study is all for the making of money, and I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that's what you should strive for. That's what I was told to strive for when I was young, and I ended up studying economics, subject I didn't had very little interest in, that I didn't really enjoy. Kind of, if I could go back in the past and change, I would have chose philosophy as my subject. I think that's something that would have spoken more to my soul. So kind of trying to follow that direction of just utility and how it can be used in society to make you a product. I believe your scholar and your studies should be for the purpose of cultivation of self. And then same with the athletic side. It shouldn't only be like, how can I try to get into sport or use it to make money? It should be, again, to see the beauty of what your body is capable of, and finding, I'd say, to dabble in different things, different kinds of subjects with the scholar side, and also different martial arts with the physical side. We do have...
There's a practical element there
Yeah.
as well, isn't it, to the warrior? The practical side of it is
Mhm.
you don't just want to be the person that is knowledgeable and can read books, perhaps an expert in that field, but then has zero practical knowledge. I think that it's good to be a well-rounded individual, almost a what's the word? A polymath? What's the
Not sure.
kind of a renaissance man? You're a specialist in a lot of different things. It's kind of what you can strive for. Well, we're not all capable of that, and it's definitely the product of discipline, hard work, and the intelligent assortment of resources. So finding a way to find a way that you can channel your mental focus in whatever subject it is. It doesn't have to be philosophy, but it could be anything, so that you can develop the knowledge in whatever field it is. But at the same time, don't ignore the physical side, because the two go hand in hand. That's what we have. We know that there is the physical. Well, we don't know that, but we know that we have a body to some degree. Let's just take that argument. And we don't know if we have a mind, but let's take that argument that we do have that and try and make the best of it.
Yeah, no, I
So
100% agree.
we're dealing with things we don't know, if we really wanted to be philosophical about it. But for the sake of argument, the two things that we can really change are our mind and our body.
Absolutely. And with as I mentioned, I've already mentioned the utility of philosophy within society. With the utility of martial arts within society, people do have this kind of automatic check that they do go to with self-defense, is that it's out of their hands, and again, call the police if anything happens. I've had many friends have certain issues. I've had things come up in the past when I was in college as well, and it's very rare that you call the police and they get to the case in any kind of efficient timing to actually help you in that situation. If I'm honest, I'd not.
But it's also the peace of mind. If you don't have the physicality to defend yourself,
Absolutely.
then anxiety, paranoia, and fear will be products
But when I
of your
had no
physical
kind of
conditions.
fighting skills whatsoever, I got in a lot of confrontations that, ended up quite badly for me. Whereas now I have that confidence and I know I can hold my own in a fight. I've actually had no fights ever since I've studied. And also having that strong mind and calm temperament that Kung Fu taught me, I've had situations that could have escalated to that. But again, it's like I have the mental martial arts to first initially find the best ways to avoid that confrontation. But I have the confidence where I'm not fearful that if it gets to that, I know I can defend myself and the ones I love. So if anything, it actually prevents those altercations from happening. And I think you hold a different aura as well, where people won't target you as a victim.
Yeah, I mean, you're difficult to break down. That's the takeaway. And really, if you are to act, then you're acting for a reason, and at that point, you're usually acting to solve a problem, and that doesn't end well for the other person. Let's just say that. So. To get to that position, really you'd have to be pushed so far. So the martial artist, in some sense, then has that iron mind that has been conditioned through physical combat. So their tolerance to stress should be, if they are not just a warrior but a scholar at the same time, should be much higher. Like, let's say you have anger issues, right? And you lose your temper and you lash out. should really start to think, what are the consequences of my action? You should really start to think be all and end all. That's the thing. But obviously there's an interesting quote I want to put forward, and that is by Aristotle, and it's, courage is the first of human qualities because it is the only quality that guarantees the others. So courage, to some degree, overrides mental a mental thought, or a
100% agree.
A thought. So the idea of just focusing on your thinking faculties doesn't allow for the cultivation of courage, which is a product of having been able to take a risk and to push yourself physically, to be practical about something, to solve something. So courage is first and foremost an important quality because it guarantees an action. It guarantees something will happen. So if you have no courage because you've never trained in your life, you're a coward, and all you do is think and all you do is study, then you're not adding that extra string to your bow, which is the physicality. You're just a thinker. You're not a
you reminded me of
you've never been tested, right? So you don't know what your capacity is.
Absolutely. You remind me of the four virtues of Stoicism. It's kind of like there's two aspects of the mind and two aspects of the body. So we mentioned courage. Two of the virtues are courage and justice. So building that courage, and then also kind of fighting for justice in society. And on the other side, you have wisdom and temperance. So I think you can be very intelligent but not have temperance. I think that's part of cultivating your mind, is to control these addictive tendencies humans tend to have, this addiction to greed or power or purpose. And if we want to go back to that person that has a weak body and a strong mind, to an extent, we can point to politicians, have our thinking done by cowards. Very often people are sent to war by politicians, but they don't fight within those wars. They usually do that for the purpose of greed and power, and they use propaganda to manipulate the population into leading towards that. Whereas if you want to go back to ancient Greek times, like say the Peloponnesian War, where Persia brought war to the doorstep of the Spartans, the King Leonidas fought with the people on the front lines. He was there fighting with his brothers in arms, and that's something you don't see in the modern day anymore.
For the sake of honor, right?
But I'll tell you, the politicians, whether they're intelligent, they went to Eton or whatever, they don't have the temperance. They're all greed hungry. They're all lust hungry. They're all, in many ways that we've seen, they're lacking. So it's not just about being intelligent. I think a cultivated mind, you need temperance as well as wisdom, and a cultivated body, you need courage as well as justice. I think those four virtues of Stoicism are very strong if you want some kind of direction to study to begin your purpose or pursuit of becoming a scholar athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about this quote from Lycurgus. It's not a quote, actually. It's more of an account of what happened to Sparta after defeating Athens. And essentially what he described as the fall of Sparta, or one of the contributing factors to their decline, was the influx of greed and foreign customs. So the Spartans were very frugal minded, right? They were not lavish in their lifestyle. They were not greedy individuals that sought out wealth and money and all these different things. They had one cloak, and they would train and they would eat just the right amount to keep their bodies lean and rid of fat and strong and whatnot. And it was this hard approach to life that conditioned such a great force that was able to defeat armies. Now, after conquering new land and bringing in that wealth, that's where you see the virtue of temperance and self-control decline, because you've got everything you need, right? You've got more than you need. You have a surplus. At the end of the day, what we need compared to what we desire is far less in number, right? We don't need much, but what we desire, that's a lot. So if we can take control of our desires and tame them, and exhibit that degree of self-control, we can get there. But with Sparta, with the case of Sparta, it was the changing in customs. So they had new people that came into Sparta that obviously were not accustomed to what Spartan ideals were. And on top of that, with the adoption of a luxurious lifestyle and eating all kinds of things, you know what will happen. And then obviously that ties in nicely with that quote that runs around social media, which is what good, I can't remember it exactly, but that strong men, good men quote.
Okay. Yeah, strong men
yeah.
lead to good times lead to weak men lead to hard times lead to strong men. So it's that cycle.
So obviously, like, the good times was when they conquered Sparta, but it was almost like a facade. It was, they were being deceived by good times, but because they were weakening their conditions, leaving them less formidable as a nation. So, and that's what led to arguably their fall.
Yeah,
as one
regardless,
or one or
even
two
if we are within
contributing
good
factors.
times, it's still important, just for the sake of it, to strengthen your tools. There's that other quote, like, it's better to be a warrior in a
No,
garden than a gardener in the war. So it's always, we have good times right now, which I think very much has weakened society, weakened men, weakened our kind of comfortability, and yeah, we're just kind of sitting there. I
you should
think
be
if
ready at all costs,
absolutely,
because
because hard times are
nature.
always just around the corner. There's always been that cycle of good and bad, just within society. And if it comes to your door, and you need to literally be the one to also help fight the hard times off, you need to be prepared.
Nature is unbelievably dynamic, right? So nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. I could lose a limb, you could, God forbid, fall sick or whatever. No one knows. So arguably, in that sense, you could say, well, nothing matters, right? I'm preparing for whatnot. But then, are you going to just throw away all meaning to life? Or are you going to strive to make best of what you have? Now, some people might sit there and say, what's the point in doing all of this? What's the point in all of that? And really, I don't know what the point is. For me, at least, I believe that it seems the most pragmatic thing to do. Pragmatic's the wrong word. It seems to be the ideal of what could be. I'm interested in what could be, not what is. So if there could be something better, then I would like that.
No, absolutely. And if I'm going to talk, because I mentioned the thinking by coward side, if we're going to kind of discuss a little bit the fighting by fools, or the kind of who are the warriors within society, I guess you could see that as modern day armies and things like that. I want to go back to I think it was the 70s, in which actually further back than that, but when Muhammad Ali was world champion at the time, and he was called to go to the Vietnam War, he refused to go to the Vietnam War, and he had his boxing license revoked. But he was also a very good example of that scholar athlete. He was more of a scholar within
Another example.
Yeah, within Islam, and he was very intelligent, very articulate, but he had his own mind and his own direction. And when he was called by his country to go fight this war that everyone at the time was very skeptical of, and everyone at the modern day looked back as a ridiculous war, and so many people died in that war meaninglessly on both sides, especially in Vietnam. But he had his own mind to the extent where he was willing to stick to his morals and go to jail. I think he was threatened with jail. He had his boxing license revoked, his whole thing torn away from him, because he had such strong belief in his own moral virtue. And I think that's what you build with that combination of strong mind and strong body. And I think he used a quote, something like, no Viet Cong had ever called him the N-word. Whereas there's still a lot of racism within America at the time, and he was almost a second-class citizen. But he was then being told to go fight for your country. And I'll say how armies are trained very much. They try to stop them from thinking. They're very kind of aggressive in their training, and any kind of insight of rebellion or self thought, they're conditioned into just believing and listening to your superior as a mindless weapon, to an extent. And as I said, if we have leaders that were led by cowards, and they are giving into their temperance of profit, money, power, gain, and they're pumping propaganda, which was way more powerful in the past because we didn't have things like the internet to see the deception by politicians and things like that. And people would tend to believe propaganda a lot more in the past.
Well, well,
In the modern day, we have that access. So I would say to everyone, like, always question your leaders as well. They are public leaders that we appoint to garner the direction we want to go in as a society. They shouldn't be taking us or using us as mindless weapons to fight their wars for profit, gain, power. Would you agree with that?
I do agree, but just to add a point on the internet there, I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
double-edged sword. On
Mm-hmm.
one side, it can make it easier for us to find out what that deception is, but on the other side, it allows them to deceive in different avenues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It allows the excess or the surplus of information so that nobody can really find out what is real.
Mm-hmm.
There's just confusion beyond confusion, unless you have a scholar or a scholar athlete behind the internet that's able to actually interpret the information that they're receiving,
Yeah, that's
right?
part of the purpose why you
Otherwise,
need to sharpen the mind in that pursuit, or you'll be susceptible to illusion, susceptible to propaganda. I think a strong mind can see through illusion. They can see truth.
also,
I can't be fooled. I know I can't be fooled because my mind.
but
Yeah.
sorry, there's a bigger problem there, right?
Mhm.
Mob think. It's much easier to trick a group than it is an individual.
Mhm.
That's why there's only one sheriff in the county, right?
Mhm.
When one person is deceived and like that number increases, then the mob can have a huge force, but they could be led by deception or by some idea that is fundamentally false and irrational, delusional, whatever you want to call it. But it becomes such a force of strength in number. But then that is a product of these individuals not actually thinking about what they are doing. That's why you have situations like, if you look at Nazi Germany, you had an entire nation that was able to commit, you know, crazy crimes that nobody could think just because they were led by some nutcase. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we can't deny our capacity for evil because we've seen it in history. So that's why we should try and accept the fact that human beings aren't perfect, but we can cultivate what is good.
This is reminding me a little bit of a Black Mirror episode. I don't know if anyone had seen it, but it was about the army, and I believe they used some kind of mind chip, or they did something with the brain when it's kind of
Oh,
futuristic, where they saw their enemies as literally kind of very like sick figures, like almost
there you
like
go.
demonic. So they did it, even though they were completely normal human beings. It made them see their enemy as like a very scary threat, so they wouldn't feel bad about murdering that enemy. And if you want to look back at World War One, World War
You
Two, the Vietnam,
dehumanize
the Cold
people.
War, there's always that process leading up to war where you demonize your opponent. You just label terrorists, for example. They use that word constantly: terrorist, 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 or they demonize the enemy to the extent you don't see them as human anymore. They, as you mentioned before about empathy and logic, the two tools of a cultivated, strong mind, they blunt those two things. They want you to feel no empathy for your, or no relation to your enemy, and they want you to abandon all reason, to just follow as a kind of just mindless warrior,
Follow by way
or
of impulse
fighting by force, as that definition says, just to, I guess, garner whatever pursuit they're truly trying to get, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's oil. It's happened many times before, and I think it should be back in the old day, like how King Leonidas fought with the people. If the politician is so passionate about this war, he should fight with the armies. If anything, I think we should just have a fight to the death. If there's disagreement between politicians, throw them in a MMA cage and let them fight to the death and decide it that way rather than millions of people dying.
yeah, I mean, we're being used as tools for their ideas and their gains and their interests, which is, you know, if anyone actually thought about that for a second, is crazy. But I suppose we are led to do things by, you know, society, and to some degree we have little choice over what we can do as well. Perhaps there is no free will, but let's not go down that road. Look, I think we've covered a lot. We're getting on a bit, so I'm just going to give some last words. I think that, you know, cultivating your mental faculties and striving for a good physical condition should be at the forefront of at least, you know, children and adult minds. You know, we can't be perfect. No one can be perfect, but we should at least try to be the best versions of ourselves. And that just doesn't apply to our characters. That's just one side of the coin. We should, you know, and in spite of everything that can become fall upon us, illness, injury, disability, all these different things that can happen, they don't define you by any stretch of the imagination, but they shouldn't restrict you either. That's what I think. So yeah.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. And my final word would be, don't make the mistakes I mentioned I made in the past. When choosing the direction you want to go in as a scholar or an athlete, don't base that externally. Don't base that on how am I going to be useful, what's going to make me the most money. I would say to look inside and find your true interests, your true direction your soul pulls you in. That is the purpose and direction you want to push yourself in as the scholar and as the martial artist, whether it's philosophy, whether it's mathematics, or whatever direction as a scholar you want to contribute to the world, which feels right to you. And in direction of martial arts, I would say I've tried many different martial arts: Kung Fu, Taekwondo, Karate, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai. Try things out, find what you enjoy, whether it's just a sport as well, or just weightlifting, whatever it may be. Find what speaks to you. So many people I see, I work in health clubs, so many people go and they're just not enjoying themselves, just trying to do weights. And I always tell people to train the things that you enjoy, and that actually makes people tend to come more and exercise and do things that they enjoy. If you're pursuing what your soul is fulfilling and nourishing your soul, then it will be a winning formula. So that's, I guess, my final word. And just to finish off the video, if you did like a conversation, please comment in the comment section below. Let us know other topics you would like us to discuss. And please like the video, share, subscribe, and yeah, thank you for listening.
Peace out.
Welcome to the Sageverse. Please just observe the birth of this creative surge, for the purpose to leave hatred purged and replaced with words that will make you learn to take your place on earth. And once you've taken your place and found your greatest of traits, cultivated the day, this will be making you say, this is the Sage's way.